Hello everyone, this is Rushil Rungta once again. I am a secondary 1 student of Raffles Institution, Singapore, and in my quest for learning, here I am with new episodes of Leadership Simplified, in conversation with people who do things differently and inspire others to do the same. My guest for today is Mr. Navin Amarasuriya. Mr. Navin represents the 5th generation of a family business with a history of 150 years. The BP De Silva Group started as a small jewelry shop on the shores of the Singapore River in 1872 and now boasts of having royalty amongst its clientele. Mr. Navin is now the Chief Operating Officer of the Contentment Foundation and through his work is helping build well-being curriculums for children around the world. Welcome, Mr. Navin. Thanks for taking out the time to have this interview with me.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. So let's begin with the history first. You come from a family with a rich history of 150 years in Singapore. And I would imagine over the years, certain family values would have been passed from one generation to another. So can you share one or two of those values that influenced you and you feel are most important for a leader?
Sure. So in the second generation of the family, which really was around the time of World War II, there was a manager in the company who was invited to a meeting by the British colonialists at the time in Singapore. And they were trying to convince business leaders that they will not let Singapore fall to the Japanese who were invading the country. And this young manager, who was maybe in his late 20s, decided to take the master key to the safe that was inside the shop. It was a jewelry shop that had millions of dollars of stock. And this was back in the 40s, so it's a lot of money. And he took all of those gems, those pearls, that gold, he put it in a sack and he buried it under his house. Now, a few days later, the Japanese invaded and there was some looting where some shops were ransacked for all of their stock. So after the war ended, the family thought that all of the stock, all of the money, that the assets that the company had was gone. They thought it was just taken. But this young manager dug it all back up and said, look, I couldn't tell anyone that I had to keep this a secret because it was worth so much. This is it back to you. And when the family tried to reward him, the manager said, when I was very young, BP De Silva, the founder of the company, gave me a little bit of shares in the company. And I was so surprised because I was young and I wasn't part of the family, but he made me feel like a part of the family. And I think there's a really, really powerful idea for me that the reason why we've gotten to 150 years was that in every generation, there is someone who decides to give more than they take. So altruism and giving is actually the most important quality of a lasting legacy like the one in my family business.
I think certain values, like you mentioned, are really important and I will always remember them. But I would also like to add that values perhaps can be passed on in so many different ways. Like, for example, about the story about burying the sack of all the gems. So, and one of the example on my side is my own school, because I'm very proud to be part of Raffles Institution, which is going to be completing 200 years next year. But even though it's been a little over a month since I've joined this school, I can really feel that deep-rooted culture and values of the institution in so many things that we do in school. So moving on, you loved animation and were a science fiction buff. You even studied animation, but then you went to a business school to get a management degree. Both these fields are so different. So what led to this decision? Did studying animation and management help you in anything you do today?
Well, Animation was and is my passion till today. I love cartoons, and I think it's an amazing medium to tell stories. I studied business because it was important, given that my family had this asset that I understood what that implied. And I think the foundational training that I got in business school, particularly in financial, accounting and management, was very, very helpful. But when I look back at my life, the most valuable skills I learned was in animation school. The skills that I use till today actually come from there. And the reason why understanding stories is so important is that all organizations, all people are simply a collection of stories. And I would highly recommend a book by an author called Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*. This is a book that basically talks about how human beings really are a collection of ideas and narratives. Singapore as a country had to first start off as a story in someone's head. Lee Kuan Yew believed, or he had a vision of what the country could be. Now, at the point he shared this vision, the country wasn't that, but he had to rally people around him towards that vision. And in the same way, when you think of very big companies today, these are also collections of stories. They convince investors and employees that they're building this thing, and they pull people in to make it the dreams a reality. And when you think about motivating groups of people as well, generally it's about the stories that they all buy into. So if you take any religious institution, whatever religion it is, it's simply a group of people that believe in a particular story. If you think about money, if you think about financial instruments like stocks or even cryptocurrency, all of these values are just based on stories. So it's very important to study storytelling, because we need to understand how to align different people's intention and motivation. And more importantly, very good stories can set the individual in a larger narrative. And what I mean by that is, if you can find a North Star that you can navigate towards, if you can find a story that is larger than even your lifetime, if you can find a story that exists beyond your death, then it's a very beautiful thing to be a part of that story. And right now I work for a nonprofit. I'm the COO of the Contentment Foundation, which brings social and emotional learning tools and mental health practices to schools all around the world. So even when I die, this work is still very important. So that's why stories are so powerful if we really, really understand them.
I think those were some really inspiring words that you had said, but I have to admit, even I enjoy stories quite a bit. They really stimulate the mind. It helps you picture what the story is trying to say. But I think about how animation has helped you. It really shows that, there is no predefined pathway to success, because you studied business, you studied animation, and now they help you today in some way or the other. So studying multiple disciplines and collaborating across different cultures can really help students like me or students who are in higher classes have more career options. And in fact, Education Minister of Singapore, Chan Chun Sing, also emphasized on this point during the recently held Education Forum 2022. So let's get on. So let's get on to the third question. One of the big influences in your career has been Patagonia's triple bottom line: planet, people, profit. Their story is quite remarkable. What about this company's operations affected you the most?
The founder of the company is a guy called Yvon Chouinard, and he began the company as simply a means to an end. He was someone who loved the outdoors. He loved rock climbing and fishing, and at the time he began, there wasn't any durable gear, so he used to tear all his clothes and all that. And the business really began from a need, and he really tried to have the company lead a very examined life. What I mean by that is, many organizations around the world don't really ask themselves the question of how what are the impacts of their world that are not calculated. So for example, if you go to a shop and you buy, like let's say a very cheap t-shirt for a couple of dollars, on the surface you can say, yeah, that's a cheap t-shirt, great, good for me. But it's also cheap because maybe the regulations in the country that manufactured that shirt was very, very poor. Maybe there were exploited people that were doing the labor for that shirt. Maybe they poisoned the waters because of the dye they used, because they didn't treat the water properly. There's this whole idea of externalities, the effects that we cannot see on the world. And part of leadership is to really ask difficult questions to yourself, which is, what is the true impact of my actions on the world? And it's very, very difficult to actually go down this path, because once you begin and once you open the door and really start looking, you realize that a lot of industries, a lot of nation states, we are living on a debt, and the debt is the environmental degradation that will impact our future generations that we are enjoying now, but they will ultimately pay the price. And not to mention, if you think about it at the national level, countries like Bhutan in the Himalayas, they are a negative carbon emitter, meaning that they generate so much power from renewables, they actually export it, so they don't actually generate carbon. However, because of other countries that exceed their capacity, climate change is still happening, so glaciers are melting and causing a lot of damage there. So why I'm so impressed with Patagonia is, till today they have a very, very strict and very, very disciplined and very, very determined approach to really try and mitigate their impact on the climate. The founder has even said, the fact that my company exists will have impact. So they really do a lot to try and help people do the right thing. And the right thing in this sense is really looking very deeply at our own actions, or at their own actions. And that has always been a huge inspiration, because I think they're one of the few companies that really, really don't just talk. They do very, very detailed work that you can read about in there are a couple of books out on it, but I'd highly recommend Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard, which is his original story of how Patagonia formed. And I think there's another one called Responsible Business, but it's basically a manual of how Patagonia implements these ideas in their industry.
I think I'll definitely take note of all the 3 books that you have mentioned till now. But overall, I really agree with you, because even when I read about Patagonia, I was very inspired. And I wish there were more companies like Patagonia who are innovative, but yet at the same time committed to sustainability.
Something that I will add is, I think a question that is inspired by Patagonia that you can ask yourself as you think about your career is, does the world really need what I make? And that's a very difficult question to ask, because, what really is a need? And what is the difference between a need and a want? But there's an argument that, for example, renewable energy is something the world needs, because we need a way to delink carbon from energy generation from carbon emission and all the other impacts. So that's a question that I've asked myself quite a lot. What does the world really need? And I try, and I don't always succeed, but I try my best to align myself as much as I can to what the world needs.
True. Even I will think about that question over time. So now let's move on to more things related to your work with the Contentment Foundation. So as you might know, US reported its first confirmed case of COVID in Jan 2020. But concerns on issues around mental well-being only started surfacing much later. Singapore formed the Mental Wellness Task Force in October 2020. But you probably believed in the importance of this issue little before others. So what made you realize this importance?
Well, we have to think about what era are we living in. And in my mind, and this is just my opinion, I think our era is defined by algorithms, information, and machine learning. And it's the first time that we have systems that are learning about our behavior and recommending us content that really we want to consume. So if you look at the most profitable companies in the world, there are engines they've developed to better understand what we want to consume and feed us that information. Now, the big challenge with that is this thing that a technology ethicist called Tristan Harris calls the race to the bottom of the brainstem. So basic neurobiology talks about how we evolved from reptiles. So at the bottom of our brainstem, we have fight or flight, and then all the way to our prefrontal cortex at the front of our brain. That's where, as human beings, we have agency and imagination and all that. So these algorithms are recommending to us content that we want to consume, just like junk food. So if there's a YouTube thumbnail which has someone like making a big funny facial expression, like or if there's something that's very clickbaity, what it's actually doing is it's appealing to our lower senses, and or our senses is not the right word, it's appealing to our more baser instincts. And as a consequence, the way that you keep people addicted on a platform is to convince them that they don't have to go anywhere else. So if you think about it for young men and young women, let's take a very simple thing like posting pictures of what the ideal body is. And if people constantly look at, let's say, images of what they think an ideal body is, the algorithm is recommending more images to them. And the thought that arises in the mind could be, why don't I look like that? Or I must look like that. And then that starts to go down this slippery slope of do I not feel enough? And in a way, this is not new, because if you think of the existence of makeup companies, like cosmetic companies, at the premise is that you don't look beautiful enough as you are, so I will sell you something to make you look more beautiful. And the danger of the algorithm is that it can take that idea and expand it much deeper, so you get more extreme behavioral outcomes. The research on what the real impact of algorithms to mental development, it's still all coming out, but there was a study that was done that talked about how usage of Facebook actually impacted the self-image of women. And you can Google that, you can look it up. So the point is that we live in a time when there's a lot of aggressive fighting for spaces of our mind. And if we're not careful, in this abundance of information, it leads to a poverty of attention. If we cannot focus our attention on how we feel, if we cannot focus our attention on what we think is important to us, if we cannot create our own stories, we ultimately get sucked into this black hole. And for some people, it's very, very damaging. So the pandemic did no favors, as you kind of alluded to. I think it just amplified these phenomena. So really, just like you go to a gym to lift some weights or do a bit of running to maintain your cardiovascular fitness or your strength, in the same way you can use scientifically evidenced practices of well-being to train your mind, and more than mind, it's your emotions as well, mind, heart, whatever you want to call it. But you can use, for example, meditation to train your attention. You can use the practice of gratitude. So every morning, if you write what you're grateful for, to orient yourself towards the great things that exist in your life. You can learn about how to listen compassionately to someone without offering solutions, but just being able to sit there and listen to their suffering without judging, without commenting. These are all skills that can be learned. And so that's the work that benefited me when I was in my 20s and 30s. This is when I learned it. And I was very fortunate to be offered a job at the Contentment Foundation. And I'm hoping to bring this work not just to students in the schools, but also to teachers and parents as well.
I really think those are some interesting facts you brought up about our minds and algorithms and how technology is also playing a part. But I guess you talked about COVID, and it was a bad time for all of us. But I guess every dark cloud has a silver lining. And in this case, COVID really helped people realize the importance of mental well-being. And I'm sure going forward, people will change the way they do things, and take care of not only their physical fitness but also their mental fitness.
Yes.
So, on to our fifth question. Eating a healthy diet, avoiding too much screen time, exercising are habits that both schools and parents encourage for children. However, you don't get to hear much about things directly related to mental wellness. As COO of the Contentment Foundation, how difficult or easy has it been to convince people about the mission of this foundation?
You know, I haven't met anyone yet that has really disagreed that all the things you said are important, right? Everyone knows exercise is important, but not everyone exercises. So more than convincing people, it's I think another way to frame that is, how do we motivate people to be curious about exploring these behaviors? And it's a very difficult question. It's actually the core question that we are also thinking about in the Contentment Foundation. There's a famous study by, I believe his name is Deaton Kenton, who I think in 2008 or 2009 he published. He's a Nobel Prize winning economist. He published a article, a research paper on what he called the misalignment problem. So he interviewed a couple of thousand people, and he said, please rank what you do every day in order of how it brings you well-being. And I think that the top one was spiritual communion or connecting with friends at the very top. And then simultaneously, he got people to track what people spend their time on. And when he tracked it, at the time, internet wasn't so big, so television was at the top. So now his whole thing was, there's a misalignment problem. So people know what's good for them, but yet based on what we see in their calendars and how they spend their time, there's a mismatch. And this goes to the importance of trying to first, before even talking about what is good or what is bad, we have to start with the story. And it goes back to the why. Why are we doing this? You know, you might hear this from time to time, that when people get very sick or they have a near-death experience, you know, their whole life changes. And the reason why is they realize time is not as long as they think. So, you know, maybe they want to serve their families more. Maybe they want to be healthier. It's kind of like if you are riding your bicycle and, you know, you almost have an accident, usually for a while after that, you'll be more careful when you ride the bicycle, because, you know, you realize why it's important. So when we think about motivation, one of the most important things is looking at the community around us. And Aristotle had a really interesting model of thinking about friends. So for him, the way that he kind of cultivated his own behavior was also being very particular about how he spent his time. So he had three groupings that I found very interesting. The first is the meet at school, you may meet them at work, but one, you're only connected because of that particular context. The second group is the friends of pleasure. So these are friends that you only have fun with. So if you're not having fun with them, if you are going through a hard time, they're not going to be there. The final group is called the friends of virtue. And these are a very special group of friends. These are friends who you admire because of their wisdom, or because of their compassion, or because they are people that are altruistic. They are people that just by hanging out around them, you ultimately reinforce the behavior that brings you true well-being. And so I think even before thinking about what to do, it's important first to maybe find friends that you admire for doing it. And then maybe spending time with them to work out why it's important to explore these ideas. And if you start with a story, a good story for yourself on why you want to do this, the sky's the limit. That will be the foundation for the rest of the journey.
Mm-hmm. I think, as you said, before even looking at convincing people, it's good to start by motivating them to do something. And I guess in some cases, that's really never easy. But the one common thing that I have observed by speaking to certain leaders is their perseverance and passion. As you said, trying to do the research and then trying to motivate people to do things. But as you said, friends are sometimes a good help, and I completely agree with the 3 different groups of friends that you had mentioned. So on to the last question. Youth mental health is receiving some serious attention now, and studies have shown that mindfulness brings both academic and non-academic benefits for children. If there was one tip that you would like to give me to improve my focus and reduce anxiety, what would it be? Something that is probably easy to do and I can share with all my friends.
Consistent practice is more important than starting very big and then stopping after a while. So my recommendation is 1 minute a day. We can all find 1 minute a day somewhere. You can download a meditation app like Headspace or Calm and practice guided meditations just for 1 minute a day. But make sure you do it every single day. And what you are actually doing is you're cultivating a very, very special kind of ability. In an age of distraction, attention is a very valuable skill. If you can delay short-term pleasure for long-term well-being, it is an incredible superpower to have because it compounds itself as you go along. And once you have attention, you can start to see the world of emotions inside you. And always make sure that you have good support from your friends, your family, and even if you need help, always be free to ask for it. But build the muscle of attention, because that's a foundation stone for many other beautiful things.
I think that was a very useful tip, and I'm definitely going to try it out. And I will share with you how I felt after doing it. So, Navin, I have gained some very valuable insights from this conversation so far. But now, to make things a bit more fun and find out a little more about you, let's get into the segment of rapid fire questions.
Let's go.
5 seconds to answer each question, and I will prompt you once your time is up. Shall we begin?
Let's go. I'm ready.
So, are you more of an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert.
What is the kindest thing someone ever did for you?
They gave me food when they didn't have enough.
Oh. And would you prefer to drive a car or ride a driverless car?
Oh, definitely drive a car.
I would ride a driverless car. But your favorite holiday destination?
I would say Bali, where I met my wife.
Oh, interesting choice. Star Wars and Star Trek, which one is your favorite?
Early Star Wars, but the spirit of Star Trek, because Star Trek is about people of different races coming together and working together for exploration.
And lastly, if you possessed Aladdin's magic lamp, what would your 3 wishes be?
My 3 wishes would be, number 1, to better understand desire and aversion for myself. Number 2, to be able to spread the idea of altruism in the world. And I wouldn't need the 3rd wish.
Well, that was terrific and some very interesting responses, I must say. But I just wanted to share with you that if I had Aladdin's lamp, my 3 wishes would be to maybe as a child have the best gaming equipment, a vaccine that would prevent me from getting any disease, and lastly, since I'm a big foodie, to eat all the food that I want but not gain any weight.
That's great wishes.
So Really, Mr. Navin, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences and explaining things to me in an easy to understand manner.
My pleasure. I hope you continue to interview people and try and find the ideas that connect everyone. I think you'll have a great story to tell, and you should write a book at the end of it.
I will. Thank you so much and have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.